Granuaile or Grace O'Malley, the Annals of the Four Masters is that medieval and early history of Ireland was written in the 1600s, and there is absolutely no mention of Granuaile or any woman for that matter in the Annals of the Four Masters. And it was written down by four monks in a Franciscan monastery in Donegal, in Ballyshannon, and three of them were O'Clearys, and the fourth was Far Fasta O'Muel Conora, but no mention of Granuaile or any other woman. Well, Grace O'Malley was born in 1530 and she died in 1603. And she was the daughter of Dubh Dara O'Malley, who was chieftain of the O'Malley clan. Now, at that time, a woman could not become chieftain of the clan according to Brehon law. But Grace, anyway, she was the only daughter of Dubh Dara O'Malley, and he had a son called Donal na Pipa, Donal of the Pipes. But Donal he didn't succeed his father in the chieftaincy of the clan. He was a far bakok. He had a limp. And of course, when you had any physical blemish, you couldn't become a chieftain. But he was obviously very good on the pipes, Donal na Pipa. Anyway, Grania also she was the daughter of Dubh Dara O'Malley, and her mother was also an O'Malley, Margaret O'Malley. And she was married at the age of 16 to Donal O'Flaherty, who was a neighbouring clan, and the O'Flahertys had a lot of land, and Donal O'Flaherty was called Donal an Cuggy, which was Donal an Cuggy. He was a fighter. It wasn't Donal an Cuggy. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember his name. I think anyway, Donal O'Flaherty, and he was seemingly not the nicest of men. But anyway, she had two sons, Murragh and what was her second son? And Owen, and a daughter, Margaret, by Donal O'Flaherty. Now, Donal O'Flaherty was killed, and when he died, Grace went back, or Granuaile, she went back to the O'Malley territories, which was in Mayo. The O'Flaherty territories were mainly in Galway, and she went back to the O'Malley territories, but she held on to the O'Flaherty territories, and many of the O'Flaherty clan came with her. Now, the really different thing about Grace O'Malley and the O'Malley clan, the motto of the O'Malley clan is Terra Marique Potens, which means powerful on land and sea. So I suppose that was the difference with the O'Malleys, is that they were very much a seafaring clan. And so she had 100 ships, and they commanded the seas around Clew Bay and right down to Galway. And at that time, it was the 16th century, and it was just after sorry, just let me get my notes here. Henry VIII was King of England when Grace O'Malley was born, and he held what was called the Lord of Ireland. And under the policies of the English government at that time, there was the semi-autonomous chieftains of the clans of Ireland. They were left mainly to their own devices. However, this was to change over the course of Granuaile's lifetime as the Tudor conquest of Ireland gathered pace. And Grace O'Malley, while she wasn't remembered or it wasn't written in the history books, she was written in the margins of the state papers, and she was also remembered in folklore, in poetry, and in song. And it wasn't until about 40 years ago that Anne Chambers, who did a wonderful biography of the life and times of Gráinne Mhaol or Grace O'Malley, and she was thorough in going to the English state papers. And this is a quote from the English state papers at the time, 1576. There came to me also a most famous feminine sea captain called Gráinne Mhaol, and offered her services unto me wheresoever I would command her, with 3 galleys and 200 fighting men, either in Scotland or Ireland. She was brought with her husband, for she was as well by sea as by land, well more than Mrs. Mate with him. This was a notorious woman in all the coasts of Ireland. So and he was referring there to her husband, who at the time was her second husband, who was Richard Burke. I'm sure, Emer, you would know all about the Burkes. The Burkes, he was called the Mac William, who the Lords of Connacht were answerable to, but of course not Grace O'Malley herself. And Mary O'Malley writes a poem, a very short poem, Gráinne's answer to Burke's proposal, and it goes like this: take me for 1 year certain, hot and cold and strong. What woman will give you as much for that long? A year in a wild place, take me or leave me as I am. So quite a confident Grace O'Malley there. She gets the name Gráinne Mhaol from, well, there's a folklore story where she wanted to go on the ship with her father, Dubh Dara, but he wouldn't allow her to go on the ship. First of all, he said it was, she had red hair, and it was unlucky for a red-haired woman to be on a ship. And also her hair was too long and it would get caught in the ropes and much too dangerous. So of course, Grace O'Malley cut her hair off and hid on the ship. And by the time her father had discovered she was on the ship, they were well out to sea. And the term Mhaol can mean bald. So Gráinne Mhaol, well, that's the term for, well, it can be Gráinne ní Mháile, Gráinne Mhaol, bald Grace. So these are all the folklore stories about her. She was very much a leader, and a leader of her clan. And the clan, I think, in terms of her leadership, she took it, and it was given to her as well. So it was a two-way street. And she fought the Bingham, who was the Elizabeth's administrator in Connacht, and he absolutely tormented her beyond anything else. And he eventually captured her son, one of her sons, and her brother, and he captured them and put them in prison in Athlone, and he would not release them. And she tried everything to get her son and her brother released, until eventually what she did was, she had a friend called Black Tom, who was a friend of the Lord Treasurer Burnley to Elizabeth. And she talked to Black Tom and asked him, would he have a word with Burnley to see if she could have a meeting with Elizabeth. So while I know a lot of the folklore would say that she sailed up the Thames and demanded to have an audience with Elizabeth I. Unfortunately, that it didn't happen as easily as that. But in Anne Chambers' books, you can see all the letters in the state papers, the letters between Grace and Elizabeth in terms of, and well, first of all, with Burnley requesting an audience with the Queen. But eventually, anyway, she met Queen Elizabeth, and the two women were supposed to have got on very well. And she told Elizabeth of the goings on with Bingham and what he had done to her son and her brother. And seemingly, there's a story that she sneezed in the meeting, and one of Elizabeth's handmaidens handed her a handkerchief, a lace handkerchief, and Grace used it and threw it into the fire. And they were quite shocked at this, and she was quite shocked at the fact that they would even think of using a handkerchief a second time. So she was definitely into disposable handkerchiefs before we had them ourselves. Anyway, so after the meeting with Elizabeth, Elizabeth wrote a letter to Bingham ordering him to release her son and her brother, which Bingham had to do. And Grace, of course, had said to Elizabeth that she would, she would certainly adhere to British law and rule when she went back to Ireland, which of course she totally ignored and got on with doing what she always did. And in fact, in Anne Chambers' book, you will read where the letter that Elizabeth wrote to Bingham omitted to say what Grace O'Malley had agreed with Elizabeth when they met. So in fact, there was no legal stance that Bingham or anybody could take against Elizabeth because it wasn't in writing, or against Grace because it wasn't in writing from the Queen. So the Queen had taken Grace's word, but hadn't got anything in writing for her. So maybe Elizabeth learned something about ensuring that everything you agree, you have to put it down in writing. Anyway, Grace went back to Ireland, and she lived until she was in her 70s. She died in 1603, the same year as Elizabeth herself died. She was known to have had many relationships. As I say, she first of all married Donal O'Flaherty. He died. She then had a number of lovers. There was one story that she had taken a lover called who had been he had been washed up on the shores of Clare Island in a shipwreck, and he was her lover for a couple of years, and he went fishing around the Achill area, and he was captured and killed by the MacMahons and of Achill. And the story goes that Grace was so upset and incensed by what the MacMahons did that she went with her men. She went and killed every MacMahon that was in Achill. She then married, as I say, Richard Burke, and she had one son with him. His name was called Tibbet or Theobald, and he became Lord Sligo. So after the Battle of Kinsale, which was a very pivotal time in Irish history, where after the Battle of Kinsale was lost, all the Irish chieftains, the leaders, left Ireland, and those who remained, in order to survive, they surrendered their lands to the Queen and got back their lands and a title. And that was, I think, more about survival than bowing their knee to the Queen of England. But it was a very important time in Irish history after the Battle of Kinsale, because it was the end of the old clan system, and primogeniture came in, where you had instead of the clan system of election, you had father, son. But I think she was she was quite quite the woman. And just to finish, I'll read a little bit for what Anne Chambers says about her. She said, when the factual evidence relating to her life is examined within the context of the traumatic times in which she lived, she emerges as a fearless leader by land and by sea, a political pragmatist and tactician, a ruthless plunderer, a mercenary, a part-time rebel, a shrewd and able negotiator, and above all, a woman who broke the mold and played a unique role in history. The story of Gráinne Mhaol, or Grace O'Malley, is the story of one remarkable woman's quest for survival and fulfillment by land and sea in a time of profound political upheaval and male chauvinistic bias.
Mm.
Sinead.